Hi there, how are you today? I hope you're having a wonderful day and welcome to our blog. Here at Home Studies, we've helped over 5,000 students with their Cambridge exams, and we thought it would be really cool to share some of our experience and insights which could help you too. So if you're preparing for the Cambridge Advanced exam, or you're interested in learning more about it, then I highly suggest you watch this video as well as the others in the series. So get yourself a cup of coffee, make yourself comfortable, and let's chat about speaking part 1. Part 1 is an interview, which is pretty standard for a speaking test. In the interview, the examiner is going to ask you personal, general questions about your work or your studies, your free time, your holidays, your future plans, your daily life, stuff like that. And to be honest, some of the questions seem kind of simple, like, where are you from? Are you working or studying? What kind of music do you listen to? These are A2 questions, but don't be fooled, okay? It's a trick. And if you know anything about Cambridge exams, they like to be tricky. This is an advanced exam, so you need to make sure your answers are C1 answers. And what that means essentially is that you need to upgrade. So to upgrade is to improve the quality of something or change it for something newer or better. So in life, we usually upgrade things like a computer system, a mobile phone contract, or a seat on the plane. But you can also upgrade your vocabulary, and I'm going to show you how. Now, if you want to do well in the speaking exam, you can start by avoiding basic words. So I'm talking about things like nice, good, like, hate. These are basic words. These are A2 words. Remember, you need to upgrade your vocabulary so that it's right for the level. So take a look at these sentences and think about how you could upgrade them. All right, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to look at some ideas. Okay, so you've come up with your ideas. Now let's take a look at mine. So instead of saying I like something, you could say I am fond of something or I am keen on something. Instead of saying you hate something, you could say you can't stand it or you can't bear it. And a better way of saying that you don't like mornings is you could say I'm not a morning person. So this is a cool idiomatic expression to show your preferences. I'm not a cat person. I'm not a coffee person. You get the idea. So to be snowed under, it means to have too much to do. So this is a great phrasal verb to show that you are really overworked or overwhelmed. And finally, unwind is a nice synonym for relax. So you could substitute that and then automatically upgrade your answer. Let's take a look now at some questions the examiner could ask you on the topic of leisure time. So look at the exam style questions and then at the rather basic responses. Focus on that language that is underlined and try to think of a way that you could upgrade it to make it more appropriate for C1. Okay, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to check my ideas. All right, well, let's have a quick look at my ideas. Yours might be a bit different, and that's okay too. But instead of saying something like, I tried to read a book, you could say, I tried to catch up on my reading. Because to catch up on something, it's to make time to do something that you haven't been able to do recently. And then instead of saying I'm interested in, you could say I'm fanatical about. And also, instead of saying I always watch, you could spin it and you could say, oh, well, I never miss my team's matches. So these are just a few ways that you can upgrade those answers to make them a little bit fancier and a little bit better for C1. Now, let's talk a little bit about the G word. Yep, I'm talking about grammar. So, are you a grammar geek like me? Do you get excited when learning about participle clauses, or do you hate it? So, does even the mention of the word grammar make you feel stressed? Well, either way, at some point, I'm sure you've used things like tenses, modals, verb patterns, relative clauses, and conditionals, stuff like that. You might not know how to name these grammar forms, but for the advanced exam, you better be able to use them. You see, you won't do well in the speaking test if you only use simple tenses and structures. To pass the test, you've got to show that your understanding and your use of grammar are at C1 level, just like your vocabulary. So therein lies the challenge, huh? How are you supposed to do that in 2 minutes? Well, again, you've got to upgrade. Like before, let's take a look at these exam style questions. These ones are all on the topic of holidays and travel. And now take a look at the rather basic responses. So focus on the text that is underlined, and as we did previously, try and think of ways that you could maybe upgrade them by using a more appropriate grammar structure. Okay, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to have a look at my ideas. Okay, so I was thinking that in the first one, because the original statement said, I imagine, if you're talking about an imaginary situation, then it's a perfect time to show you can use the second conditional, right? So you could say, if I had the chance, I would love to be a flight attendant. I also added an interesting little expression there. So I'd leap at the opportunity to. This shows that you would take the chance. It would be something that you would be very happy to do. In the second one, instead of saying I plan to, we can use the future continuous. So you could say I'll be traveling. And also I changed I really like into I'm really into, just because it's a more suitable expression. Now, you'll see as well, I've added 2 adverbs. So absolutely to show enthusiasm, and actually to kind of fact check. So it's really good if you can to use these sort of adverbs in speaking, because they do add a lot of color to your answers. To explain what I mean by don't go off on a tangent, I want to tell you just a quick little story. Many years ago, I went on what could be described as the world's worst date. So I asked this guy a question, and then he spoke uninterrupted for about half an hour, like talking about this and that, and he jumped around. And the funny part is that in those 30 minutes, he never actually answered my question. Now, obviously, I didn't get the chance to say one word, so I pretended that my cat was sick, and then I ran out of the pub. The truth is, I don't have a cat. So as you can see, to go off on tangents on a date is terrible, but in a speaking test, it's even worse. So if you start talking about a completely new topic, or you jump from point to point in a really chaotic way, then the examiner might think you haven't understood their questions, or that you haven't listened to them. And in either case, it's not good. So to do well in the speaking test, you need to stay focused and you need to stick to the topic. Okay, now it's over to you. So why don't you write your answers to these exam style questions in the comments section below. Take a look at these questions. They are exactly the kind of things the examiner might ask you, and it's good practice in being focused and sticking to the topic. So write your answers in the comment section, and the first commenters will get some feedback on their responses. So get writing, press pause and press play when you're ready to go on. Before becoming a teacher, I used to work in one of those big corporations. You know, the kind in a skyscraper with like 40 floors? So the one morning I'm waiting for the lift and the director of the company comes to stand next to me. And then we get into the lift together. The doors close and we just stand there. And I watch the elevator starting to go up. 1, 2, 3. Oh my goodness, it's moving so slowly. And there's like 30 more floors to go. And I don't know if I should say something or if I should wait for him to say something or if it's okay just to say nothing. Ugh. So we just stand in this uncomfortable silence all the way up to the 35th floor. And I'm so happy when the doors finally ping open again and I can be out of that situation because it's just so awkward. So, awkward is that situation that makes someone feel a bit worried, a bit embarrassed, or very uncomfortable. And awkward silence is definitely not a good thing in the exam. When you don't quite understand someone's question or you don't know what to say, it is a common reaction to stay silent. But saying nothing is just about the worst thing you can do in the speaking test. It's very awkward. It's better to say something, even if you make a mistake, than to sit in silence and stare at the examiner. Fortunately, there is a solution, and that is to learn to use some filler expressions. So these expressions help you to buy time when you don't know how to answer the examiner's question. So you could say things like, oh, that's an interesting question, or let me think about that. Well, you see, or I never really thought about that before, but. So these are just some filler expressions. I'm interested to know if you can think of any more. So pause the video, go down to the comments section and write down the filler expressions you think you could use in your advanced exam. Have you ever memorized a poem or a speech or a sonnet from Shakespeare? There are times when memorizing text is really a good thing. However, the speaking test is not one of those times. The examiners want you to speak naturally, just like you would in real life. It's usually very easy to tell when someone has memorized their answers. It's like they're trying to rephrase the question to the one they want to answer. Do you know what I mean? So honestly, besides what's your name and where are you from, any questions and answers that you try to memorize probably won't come up in the test. So it's much better to learn fixed expressions that you can use to talk about lots of stuff rather than trying to memorize full answers. Okay, so I've made a list of the fixed phrases for advanced that I think could really help you in your speaking test. So make a note of these. They are phrases that can be used to talk about a variety of different topics and that can be used to answer a variety of different questions. So for example, I could say, I'm really into tennis, or I'm really into traveling, or I'm really into playing League of Legends with my mates at the weekend. Another expression, I'm a massive fan of heavy metal, or Manchester United, or any film directed by Wes Anderson. And how about with the negative? So, for example, I can't stand tofu, or ironing, or people who are clearly lying about their lives on Instagram or TikTok. So those are just some examples I can think of to express my preferences. How about yours? So why don't you pause the video and tell us about some of your preferences using some of these fixed expressions in the comments section below. When I was at university, I used to have this old Alfa Romeo, and I loved that car, but my goodness, it was a piece of junk. Like the wipers didn't work, so I couldn't see anything when I was driving in the rain. To open the door, you had to roll down the window and kind of put your arm out and open it from the outside because the handle on the inside didn't work. It sounded like a tractor, so you could hear my car coming from like a mile away. And then one morning, it just didn't start. It had died overnight, so I had to ditch my beloved car. So to ditch means to get rid of something that is no longer wanted. We usually use this word, it's informal, by the way, to talk about things we no longer want or need. But in the context of the speaking test, you need to ditch these one-word short responses. If you give a short answer in the exam, like if the examiner asks you, where are you from? And you just say, Geneva, then you aren't really giving the examiner anything to assess you on, right? So if you say too little, you miss the opportunity to show the examiner your speaking skills. On the other hand, though, if you say too much, then it might be a bit overcomplicated, and the more you complicate things, the more mistakes you could make. So I would say in part 1, aim to give like 2 to 4 sentence answers. This isn't an exact rule, but it is a useful guide. There is one disclaimer to that 2 to 4 sentence guide, though. When you answer the first introductory questions, like where are you from, are you working or studying, to give an answer like this, it's enough. You don't want to say too much right at the beginning, and you definitely don't want to give a long pre-prepared monologue. So an answer along these lines would be just about perfect. These birds are parrots, and my grandma had a parrot. Me and my cousins were determined to teach that parrot to say something. So every time we were alone with this parrot, we'd say, what you doing? What you doing? What you doing? But it never repeated. Then one day my grandma was looking for a book on the bookshelf, and from behind her she hears, what you doing? In this super creepy voice. My poor grandma, bless her, she nearly jumped out of her skin, and we laughed and laughed at that very clever bird. But now to parrot, or to repeat exactly what someone else says, in the speaking test is not so clever. In fact, it's a pretty bad idea, and I'm gonna tell you why. So the thing is, when you parrot someone's question or you parrot what they say, it looks like you don't really understand what they're asking you, or you don't know how to reply to that question. So in the exam, if you're parroting the examiner, then they would think that you really don't know what else to say. So look at this example of a parroted response. You see, it exactly repeats the structure in the present perfect continuous that the examiner has used. So pause the video and try and think of how you could upgrade this answer to make it more natural. Then press play when you're ready to check my suggestion. Instead of saying I've been learning English, you could say I've been studying it. So it is the pronoun, which is much more natural. We don't really kind of repeat the same nouns and questions and answers in English for a while now. And then add a bit of information since about the age of 6. So this is a much more natural response, and it would give the examiner the impression that you're a confident, competent speaker of English, that you don't need to rely on what they've said in order to come up with your own reply. Well, that's going to do it. I hope you're feeling pretty good about speaking part 1. If you do feel like you got something out of this video, please go ahead and click the like button or share this post on your socials. And don't forget to leave your examples of exam style questions, time fillers, and your preferences in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. So have a good rest of your day. In this video, we're going to talk about the 5 practical steps that you can take to get a higher mark in Advanced Speaking Part 2. So, if you're preparing for the Cambridge Advanced exam, or you're interested in learning more about it, then I highly suggest you watch this video as well as the others in the series. Okay, let's start from the beginning. So in the test, you get 3 photographs like these and choose 2 to speak about. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. I know that when you see pictures, you feel like you should describe them. So you would say, I can see a person dressed in warm winter clothes, wearing ski boots, holding ski poles, and carrying a large rucksack on his back. Am I right? Well, I'm sorry. In this exam, that's wrong. That is not the brief for the Cambridge Advanced. You have 1 minute to compare the two photos and answer the questions about them. So in this case, the questions are, how might the people be feeling, or why might they be in these situations? So just 1 minute, that's the time it takes to make a cup of tea. It goes like this. You've got no time for rambling on about the color of his winter hat. You have to get straight to the point. They say you should spend about half the time comparing the pictures and the other half answering the questions. So let's look at an example. Let's say then that in the exam you choose these two pictures. So you need to start by comparing them, and then you need to answer the two questions about them. Let's look at a sample. In the first picture, there appears to be a person hiking in extremely hot, dry conditions, like in the desert or a canyon. Whereas in the second picture, the person looks to be ski touring in some snowy mountains. In picture 1, they might be feeling boiling hot on account of the weather, while in picture 2, they must be freezing cold. In both pictures, I suppose the people are feeling exhilarated by the activities that they are doing. Now, in this short text, there are 3 magic words that we can use for comparing pictures. Can you take a moment to find what those magic words are? Okay, so how are you doing so far? Did you manage to find the 3 words? Well, they are whereas, while, and both. And you should try to use these 3 words when comparing the images in every Speaking Part 2 task that you do. Right, so let's talk a little bit about speculation. What is that all about? Well, say you're scrolling on Instagram and you see your ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend with a new person. It's only natural to speculate about that person and their relationship. You could say to yourself, perhaps they're just friends. Maybe they're dating. They might even be in love. This is all speculation, and it's part of our DNA. When we don't know the answer to something, or we're curious about something or someone, then we guess or we speculate about them. In the speaking exam, the examiner is going to listen for how well you can speculate. To be honest, there aren't really any right or wrong answers in the speaking test. The examiner doesn't expect you to be some kind of expert on the topic. They just want to see how well you can express your ideas and opinions about that topic. So the focus is less on what you say and more on how you say it. That's why it's important that you practice speculating as you prepare for your exam. So let's do that now, shall we? Here is an example of an exam-style task. There are 3 pictures. Choose 2 of them to talk about and then answer the questions. What are the people doing up there and how might they be feeling? So grab your phone or any other device that you can record on and record yourself speaking for 1 minute. After you're done speaking, play back the recording and listen for how many examples of speculative language you used. Press pause on the video and press play when you're ready to continue. Some of the pictures in the Cambridge exam can be a little weird or a bit unclear, and this one is no exception. To be honest, I have absolutely no idea what that guy is doing up the tree, so it would be natural for me to speculate about him. I could say, he's wearing camouflage, so I'd say he's a hunter. Maybe he's in the army, or perhaps he's just a bit crazy. Let's assume he's a hunter, which means he's probably looking for wild animals. It looks like he's looking down. He might be asleep. It seems like a strange place to relax. So these are just some of the ideas I can come up with. What about you? Can you think of any others? So if you have any thoughts, why not write them down in the comment box below? And it would be a great opportunity for you to try out using speculative language. To get into the topic of correction and self-correction, I just want to tell you a short story. When I was younger, my family moved to Portugal, and I remember one day we went to the supermarket. My dad, who was learning Portuguese at the time, asked an old lady to give him a shopping cart, but he used the wrong word. And looking confused and slightly uncomfortable, the old lady leaned towards my dad and she gave him a big hug. So it turns out the word for cart and affection are really similar in Portuguese, and my dad had no idea. He was so embarrassed by his mistake, but we found it hilarious, and to this day, we remember both of those words perfectly. The moral of the story is that it's okay to make mistakes, because sometimes we can learn from them. And actually, native speakers make mistakes all the time, so there's no shame in it. The important thing is that you try to correct the mistakes rather than just ignoring them. While you're practicing for the exam and in the exam itself, listen to what you're saying. And if you hear a mistake, correct it. The thing is, if you can self-correct, then you're going to impress the examiner. So instead of losing marks because of your mistakes, you could end up getting a better one. How about we do a little test? Let's see how well you can identify your own mistakes in your speaking. So here is an exam-style task. There are 3 pictures, and you need to choose 2 of those pictures to speak about. There are also 2 questions you need to answer. In what ways are people polluting the environment, and how easy would it be to stop this kind of pollution? Right, so pause the video and record your answer on, for example, your mobile phone. After 1 minute, stop the recording and play back. Listen to your own speaking and see how many errors you can spot. Try to identify your mistakes and correct them if you can. Pause the video and press play when you're ready to continue. So how easy did you find it to spot your own mistakes? I guess part of the challenge is to identify the mistake, and then the next part is to know how to correct them while you're speaking. So in order to do that, let's look at one more example. Can you spot the mistake in this sentence? So the fabric in the picture is polluting the environment by putting a lot of toxic emissions into the air. Take a moment and find the mistake in the sentence. Did you manage to spot the mistake? That's right, the word is factory, not fabric. Fabric is sometimes a mistake people make because of a mother tongue interference or the word that they use in their native language. So you could correct it using an expression like, sorry, I meant to say. So for example, the factory in the picture is polluting the environment by putting a lot of toxic emissions into the air. Imagine you're this guy. You're in the speaking test and the examiner shows you your 3 pictures and you don't know the words for any of the images on the sheet. Oh my goodness, what do you do? Do you panic? Do you run out of the room? Do you start to cry? Do you pretend to faint? I mean, all of these are options, but none of them are especially good ones. Instead, keep calm and circumlocute. Circumlocution is a seriously useful skill for speaking. It means that when you don't know the exact word for something, then you can still describe it using words you do know. In other words, you can think of another way to say it, or you can talk around the unknown word. Now, there are a number of ways that you can use circumlocution while speaking. Firstly, you can use relative clauses. So those begin with relative pronouns like that, which, who, when, where, and so on. For example, that's the guy who, or that's the sport in which, or that's the place where. So if you don't know a word, you should be able to explain it with a definition. And when you define a word, it's a good idea to use a relative clause. If you forget a word, you can also try to think of an easier word with a similar meaning or a synonym. So for example, if you can't remember the word polluted, then you could say extremely dirty. Now remember, you are graded on your vocabulary in the test, so don't use too many simple words, but if you get blocked, it is a good idea to use one of these expressions just to keep going. If you don't know a word, you could also describe it by using phrases like it's a kind of, it's a type of, or it's a sort of. For example, if you're trying to describe a beetroot, you might start by saying it's a kind of dark red, purple root vegetable that people often use to make soups. And these two, thingamajig and thingamabob, are really fabulous words in English. So can you repeat them, please? Thingamajig, thingamabob. One more time. Thingamajig, thingamabob. Great job. So even native speakers use these a lot when they don't know the word for something. And I find myself using them a lot for things around the house. So for example, I could say, oh, can you pass me that thingamajig over there? Or do you know where I can find the thingamabob to connect my phone to the laptop? My suggestion is to learn these and memorize them because you never know when you might need them or how they could come in useful in the exam. Let's try and find an example of circumlocution. So, in the exam, you could say something like, in this picture, people are destroying the environment by cutting down trees and clearing forests. They're using, it's a kind of vehicle which is used for lifting and moving logs. So can you spot the circumlocution in this text? Take a minute to highlight it. Could you find the example of circumlocution? Well, yeah, you're right. There it is at the bottom of the text. It's a kind of vehicle which is used for lifting and moving logs. So we've used two of our techniques there. We've defined it with a phrase, it's a kind of, and then we've used which as a relative pronoun to add more information. Do you know that feeling when you're telling someone a story and they just aren't listening to you? Like you're trying your best to share something that you think is like really interesting or funny or personal, and it's obvious they haven't heard a single word that you've been saying. Ugh, it's awful. Now, imagine feeling like that in a speaking exam. It would be a total nightmare. So if you don't want to make your speaking partner feel that way, be sure to actively listen to what they say. And in fact, active listening is one of the skills that you are assessed on. The examiner will check that you're paying attention by asking you a question about your speaking partner's photos. You'll be graded on how well you've listened and reacted to what they said. And believe me, they will definitely be able to tell if you're not concentrating, in which case you won't get a good mark. Let's take a look at an example response that shows evidence of active listening. So imagine the examiner has asked the follow-up question of which environmental problem is the worst. So your partner gives their ideas, and then it's your turn to respond. So you say, well, that's a good question. As my partner said, factories are a major source of air pollution. I think that they also put a lot of toxic chemicals into rivers, which is not only bad for the environment, but also dangerous for our health. However, I'd argue that cars, which are the biggest source of CO2 emissions, are even worse. Hopefully, as electric cars become more popular, the damage done to the environment will decrease. Okay, so take a moment and try and find the two examples of language that show you've been actively listening to your partner. Well, did you manage to find the right underlined expressions? So as you can see, it's good to summarize what your speaking partner has said and then give your own opinion. So this sample answer would take about 20 seconds, and that's fine. You can talk up to 30 seconds on your turn. Well, that's going to do it. I hope you're feeling pretty confident about getting a higher mark in Speaking Part 2. If you do feel like you got something out of this video, please go ahead and click the like button or share the post on your socials. And don't forget to leave your examples of speculative language in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. In this video, we're going to talk about 5 ways to impress the examiner in Advanced Speaking Part 3. So if you're preparing for the Cambridge Advanced exam or you're interested in learning more about it, then I highly suggest you watch this video as well as the others in the series. So make yourself a hot beverage, get comfortable, and let's chat about Speaking Part 3. To get into the topic of today's video, I want you to take a minute and think of someone who you consider to be a great communicator. Think about that person and think about why or how it is that they manage to communicate so well. Is it their use of words or their body language? Is it their facial expressions? Do they seem genuinely interested in what others are saying? So do they listen to other people and make them feel interesting, intelligent, and included in that conversation? Whatever it is, I'm sure you're able to talk with them amicably. So that is to discuss something with someone in a really pleasant, friendly way. So what do you think? Are they having a pleasant discussion? I'd say so. I mean, the woman has got a big smile, which no doubt puts everyone at ease. She's using her hands, so she's gesturing, which also brings the others into the conversation. They all seem to be making eye contact. So overall, it feels like the kind of situation in which people would be comfortable and happy to participate. This is the kind of atmosphere that you need to recreate with your speaking partner in the exam room. So not something stiff and awkward, but rather a friendly, relaxed vibe. So that's the tone. What about the task? In part 3, you get a mind map and some written prompts just like this one. The examiner gives you instructions for the task, which you discuss with your partner for about 2 minutes. So the prompts are there just to help you out. You don't need to talk about all of them. And in fact, it's more important to have a detailed, in-depth discussion with your speaking partner about a few of those, rather than talking about them all quickly and superficially. So in part 3, you both have the chance to talk about the topic and share your opinions. Now, of course, you could have different feelings and views depending on the topic. So remember that the test isn't a place to argue. It's a place to discuss and share your ideas in an amicable way. What's more, it's important to make sure your body language isn't defensive, as it might be kind of intimidating for your speaking partner. The friendlier you look, the more comfortable they will feel, and the better you'll both do in the test. Whether you're on a romantic dinner date, in a business meeting, or in your speaking test, listening attentively or carefully to the other person will make you a better conversationalist and improve the quality of your conversation. And believe me, in the test, the examiners will take notice. When I was at university, I studied Spanish, and I remember one particularly traumatic speaking test. I had finished my speaking turn and I zoned out. I was trying to remember what I had prepared for the next part. And suddenly the professor turned to me and asked if I agreed with my speaking partner. Oh my goodness, I had no idea what they had said, like absolutely no clue. So I just said, sí, claro que sí, like, yeah, sure, I agree. And I stared at him. He stared at me, and it was obvious that I was in big trouble in that exam. So my advice to you is don't do what I did. Stay alert and actively listen for the whole speaking test. So what do you think about these people then? Is their conversation going well? Well, I highly doubt it. They all look completely disengaged. The man is on his phone and doesn't seem to be listening to the ladies at all. His body position is also quite cold, like he's turned away from them. The blonde woman, she's looking down and avoiding eye contact, so she looks quite upset or uncomfortable. All in all, the body language is pretty negative. Now remember, to be a good listener, you also need to let the other person know that you are listening. And that's why in the test, just like in real life, it's good to use body language and gestures like nodding your head or smiling to show your speaking partner and the examiner that they've got your full attention. Active listeners have a lot of skills, but let's look at the two most useful ones for the speaking test. Firstly, it's the ability to ask open-ended questions. So that's things like, what do you think about? How do you feel about? So those are all those questions that start using the WH words. Okay, so read this example. And there you can see they've asked two open-ended questions, which are designed to get the speaking partner to come into the conversation and to give their opinions on the topic. And the second top active listening skill is the ability to request clarification if you don't understand something that has been said. So for example, by saying things like, what exactly do you mean? Or could you explain what you mean by? So read this example in which they ask for clarification. And in case you're interested, product obsolescence is the policy of making a product with a deliberately bad design so that it becomes obsolete, useless, or unfashionable after a short period of time and needs to be replaced. So like what they do with lots of mobile phones and other technology these days. Have you ever heard the idiom to be like talking to a brick wall? It means that you're talking to someone who isn't listening to you, like not listening at all. I'm sure you've experienced this before, and I know I have. It is the worst. You're trying to tell a story or share something personal or get someone's opinion about something. An old brick wall over there is giving you nothing. They don't react. They don't agree or disagree. They don't ask you any questions. There's nothing. Nada. Zip. Honestly, you'd be better off talking to your cats. In the speaking test, however, there are no brick walls allowed, okay? You need to fully engage your speaking partner and react appropriately to what they say. What do I mean by that? Well, let's find out. Okay, so take a moment to read this interaction in which the exam candidate responds appropriately to what their speaking partner has said. So here, the partner gives their opinion and then you react. You make it clear you've listened, you agree, so I couldn't agree with you more, and then you add some more information to keep the conversation going. The examiner would give you a very good mark for this response. The statement, I couldn't agree with you more, shows strong agreement. Here are some more examples. You could say, I completely agree with you. You're absolutely right. There's no doubt about that. My thoughts exactly. I see exactly what you mean. I couldn't have said it better myself. So, can you think of any other examples? Press pause on the video and jot down some ideas. You can also express agreement in more neutral terms. So take a moment to read this interaction. So again, this is a good response. They've reacted appropriately by showing their agreement. That's well put, as well as adding more information to develop the topic. Again, you would get a good mark for this response in the exam. So as I said before, the expression that's well put is an example of showing neutral agreement. Here are some more examples. That's a good point. I'm with you on that. I see what you mean. That's also how I see it. You can't argue with that. So pause the video and take a moment to write down any other examples that come to mind. Okay, so now it's time to get into it. Here are a list of controversial statements, so things that people have divided opinions about. Pause the video and look at the statements and see which of them you agree with. Okay, so express your agreement in the comment section below and we'll give feedback to the first commenters. I used to have a friend Let's call her Jolene, who was a nightmare in any kind of debate. She was really oversensitive, and anytime you disagreed with her opinion on something, she'd take it very personally, like you were attacking her, when actually you just didn't agree with her point of view. So one time we were talking about being vegetarian, which she was, and I said, I understand why people don't want to eat meat for ethical reasons, but I'd find it hard to give up sausages because I love sausages. Anyway, she got really upset by that. She called me stupid and asked how I'd like it if someone made me into sausages. Well, I said that would be cannibalism, so I wouldn't like it at all, thank you very much. But anyway, ridiculous interactions like these were the reason why we used to be friends. In the speaking test, it's okay if you and your partner don't agree. In fact, disagreement can be a good thing as it leads to further discussion. There is one condition though. You need to disagree in a respectful way. So don't be combative or defensive. In short, don't be a Jolene. So what's your opinion on this? Do you think their discussion is productive? Well, probably not. It looks like one of them has got offended. So they've become angry or upset by the conversation. So it's unlikely that they'll be able to discuss things amicably. When you disagree with someone, it can be quite difficult to express your point of view without offending that person, right? Just like we saw in the previous picture. That's why it's good to acknowledge your speaking partner's opinion before you disagree with them. So you make it clear that you understand what they're saying and that it is a good point that they are making. Take a moment to read this example. So first you acknowledge their opinion. That's a valid point. And then with but, you introduce your own differing point of view. It can also be a really good idea to add an apology to introduce your disagreements. So this is a very British way of going about it. So it makes it more polite and less direct. And remember to always add a reason for your differing opinion. So take a look at an example. So there's that apology, I'm afraid, followed with your point of disagreement. Here are some more examples of the language of disagreement that I could think of. So things like, I see what you're saying, but I take your point, but I see what you mean. However, or simply, I'm not convinced. So can you think of any other ways of disagreeing politely in English? Pause the video and jot down some ideas. Okay, and we're back to some controversial statements. Same as before, pause the video and look at the statements. This time, which of them do you disagree with? Okay, so express your disagreement in the comment section below. And once again, we'll give feedback to the first commenters. And remember, even though things like vaccines get people really emotional, remember to keep your opinions respectful. As a final tip, and I really like this one, if you would like to sound more British, then you can pretend to be unsure about agreeing. So for example, you could say, I'm not so sure I agree with you about this. But if you know anything about the British, what they say and what they really mean can often be two very different things. So in this example, what you really mean is, well, I totally disagree with you. What absolute rubbish. Now, in the exam, talking time, or the amount that each of you speak, really matters. And in a minute, we'll see exactly why. So what's missing here? Well, the answer, in short, is conversation. Neither of them is ready to break the ice and say something. In the exam, sitting in silence and saying nothing is honestly just about the worst thing you could do. So be ready and be proactive. Either offer your opinion on one of the prompts or ask your partner for theirs. Either way, do your best to get that conversation going. You see, this is a collaborative task, which means it should be a dialogue, not a monologue. Whatever you do, please don't monopolize the 2 minutes. To do well in the speaking task, you need to bring your speaking partner into the discussion to ensure equal talking time. So the easiest way to do this is by asking them for their ideas and their opinions. And that's why one of the most important skills for this part of the exam is question asking. So take a look at this example. And this is a really great interaction. Something like this is bound to get you a good mark in the speaking test because you give your opinion, you give a reason for your opinion, and then you ask your partner for their opinion. So what are your thoughts on that? Right, so back to the mind map. I want you to now pause the video and try and think of 5 questions that you could ask your speaking partner about this task, so about this mind map. Okay, so pause the video and press play when you're ready to check out my ideas. So if I were you in the exam, I would ask questions like, how do you feel about working holidays? Or what do you think about adventure holidays? What's your view or what's your take on holidays with educational activities? Or what do you reckon, meaning what do you think, people consider on a beach holiday? So these are just some examples. I'm sure you were able to come up with a few more. Okay, cool. So once your time is up for the first part of the task, the examiner asks you and your speaking partner another question, which you need to talk about for about 1 minute. So in the context of the previous mind map, the second question could be something like, which would be the best holiday option for someone who is feeling stressed and in need of a break? And then you and your speaking partner need to discuss and reach an agreement. Again, take care not to dominate the conversation, but rather exchange ideas. So share that talking time until you come to a decision about the question. So do you get what I mean? Well, let's look at a quick example, and I think that will make things really clear for you. So take a minute and read the interaction. So that expression there, so do we agree on that? That's a good one just to memorize and use when you've come to an agreement in the speaking test on exam day. Well, that's going to do it. So I hope you're feeling pretty good about speaking part 3. If you do feel like you got something out of this video, please go ahead and click the like button or share the post on your socials. And don't forget to leave your examples of agreeing or disagreeing with those controversial opinions in the comment box below. We'd love to hear from you. In this video, we're going to look at 6 hot topics that often come up for discussion in Advanced Speaking Part 4. So if you're preparing for the Cambridge Advanced exam or you're interested in learning more about it, then I highly suggest you watch this video as well as the others in the series. So get yourself a hot drink, make yourself comfortable, and let's chat about Speaking Part 4. In January, I always make New Year's resolutions. You know those promises that you make to be a better, healthier, fitter human being? Well, I don't know why I bother with those because every year by February, I'm back to eating chocolate, drinking too much coffee, and watching Netflix on the sofa instead of going to the gym. But habits like these, along with health, diet, exercise, and sport, are the kind of things that the examiners like to discuss in Speaking Part 4. Here is an exam-style question on the topic of health and lifestyle. Is it difficult to have a healthy lifestyle in the modern world? Why or why not? Pause the video and then discuss the question with a friend or record yourself. Then play it back and see how your answer could be improved. Press play on the video when you're ready to go on. Are you a fitness fanatic or a couch potato? Or perhaps you're both, depending on your mood. Well, in case you didn't know, fitness fanatic and couch potato are two examples of collocations in English. So collocations are words that naturally work together in English. Now, if you want to sound more like a native speaker and do better in the speaking exam, then it's a really good idea to try using collocations like the ones in this activity. So press pause on the video and then choose the phrases in the sentences that best describe your opinions. Press play when you're ready to continue. Like you, I'm aware that the earth is in a terrible mess. I try to do my part, like I wash out my used yogurt cups or food containers. I avoid using plastic bags. I reduce my water usage, and I try to teach my young kids to do the same. But then I think about the large-scale damage that is being done to the earth by huge factories and oil companies and mines and by airlines and cruise ships. And it's just, well, it's awful, really. And I genuinely worry about what kind of world we are leaving for our children and our future grandchildren. In the speaking test, the examiner might ask you about this, about climate change and pollution, as well as recycling and other eco-friendly initiatives. So you get to talk about not only the problems facing us, but also possible solutions. Take a look at another exam-style question on the topic of the environment. Do you think that individuals can do very much on their own to protect the environment? So like before, pause the video and discuss the question with a friend or record yourself, and then play back to check your answer. Press play on this video when you're ready to continue. In the exam, candidates that can use idioms correctly and appropriately do get a better mark. So why not try integrating some of these idioms into your speaking on the topic of the environment? So pause the video and look at the sentences. Choose the right words to complete each of the idioms. Then press play when you're ready to check your answers. How did you get on with these idioms? Did you know any of them? Did any of them ring a bell? Well, let's find out. Number one is to turn a blind eye. So this is to ignore something that you know is wrong. Number two is the tip of the iceberg. So this is the small, noticeable part of a much bigger problem. Number three, getting out of hand means getting out of control. Number four, to be in deep water means to be in serious trouble. Number five, a drop in the ocean is a very small amount compared to what is needed. Number six, the bottom line is the most important fact in a particular situation. And number seven, gaining ground is making progress or becoming more popular. So make a note of these in your notebook and try to use them actively in your speaking. I've had a lot of different jobs in my life. I've been a waitress at an Italian restaurant. I've been an office worker, a teacher trainer, a school manager, and actually I was even a clown for children's parties when I was at university. Each of those jobs involved different skills and know-how. They needed different kinds of training, and they paid very different salaries. Each one of them had their own set of benefits and downsides. These are the kind of things that could come up for discussion in Speaking Part 4, in reference to your own experiences, but also to work and employment in general. Here's one more exam-style question on the topic of jobs and working life. Which is more important in any job? Qualifications, personality, or work experience? So as we did before, press pause on the video, practice it, and press play when you're ready to continue. In part 4, you need to use a wide range of vocabulary to do well. So using words like the ones in this activity can help to show the examiner that you're a solid C1 candidate. So pause the video, then complete the sentences about Diana's job. There are some letter prompts there to help you in case you need them. Then press play when you're ready to go over your answers. Let's check your answers and see how many of these vocabulary items you knew. So number one is a dead-end job. This is a job in which you've got no chance of progressing or getting a better position. Number two is maternity leave. This is the break that women take from work when they want to have a baby. Number three is volunteer work. So this is work that you do without pay, usually for a charity. Number four is a workaholic. This is a person who works too much and they find it difficult not to work. Number five is job satisfaction. That's the feeling of pleasure or achievement you get from doing your job. Number six is the breadwinner, so the person who earns the money that the family needs. And number seven are benefits. So these are the advantages that employees get from their employer in addition to money, so in addition to their monthly salary. When I think of globalization, I think of this. A group of friends of different ethnicities or races all hanging out at a huge shopping center, buying products from all over the world and happily participating in consumer culture. Now, sure, I realize that there is much more to globalization than just this. It's also global social influences. It's the internet, social media, international travel, the spread of viruses and diseases across borders, and more. It's a huge topic and one that's quite hard to define, with obvious advantages and disadvantages. It definitely makes for a great discussion, and that's why it's a popular choice in the exam. Let's do a bit more practice with an exam-style question on the topic of globalization. What do you think is the most positive aspect of globalization? Why? So pause the video and press play when you're ready to continue. Phrasal verbs are a big deal in the advanced exam, not only in Speaking Part 4, but in every paper, in every part of the test. Phrasal verbs add color and range to your speaking and your writing. And to be honest, they make you sound a lot more natural. So it's really important that you try to actively include phrasal verbs into your communication. So let's practice, shall we? Pause the video and complete the sentences using the correct particles. So those are prepositions or adverbs. Then press play when you're ready to check your answers. Right, so how good are you at phrasal verbs? Well, let's find out. So number one is to come across. This is to find something by chance. Number two is to throw away. So this is to get rid of something, like it's rubbish. Number three is to take up. This is to start a new activity or hobby. Number four, eat out. This is to eat at a restaurant. And count on is to be sure that something will happen. Number five, to give up. This is to stop doing something or having something. Number six is to go after. So this is to chase or target something or someone. And number seven is to keep up with. So this is to continue to be informed about something. Okay, so how many of these did you get right? Have you ever heard the saying that money makes the world go round? Well, it basically means that money is essential. And while it might be more important to some people than to others, there is no denying that it's necessary to survive in the modern world. I mean, if you want to pay your rent or your mortgage, buy food or petrol, get medicine, go on holiday. If you want to do any of that, then you've got to have money. Money makes things happen. So if this topic comes up, which it often does, you could be asked concrete questions about the different ways of making money, of spending, saving, or wasting it, or more hypothetical questions of whether money can buy happiness. And on that note, let's look at a related exam-style question on the topic of money and finances. Some people say it's only possible to be happy if you have a lot of money. What's your opinion? Pause the video and press play when you're ready to go on. As I mentioned before, people have very different attitudes and opinions on this topic. For you to express your attitude with precision in Speaking Part 4, it can be a good idea to use attitude markers. Now, these can be adverbs or phrases, but we'll just use adverbs, so that's words ending in ly, in this task because they're the easiest to integrate into your speaking. So pause the video, then complete the sentences with attitude markers. Please use the words in brackets to help you. Then press play when you're ready to check your answers. Did you find it easy to come up with the attitude markers, or were some of them a bit tricky? Well, check your answers and then let's practice your pronunciation. So I will say one and then you repeat after me. Number 1, undoubtedly. Number 2, ideally. Number 3, unfortunately. Number 4, surprisingly. Number 5, arguably. Number 6, interestingly. Number 7, admittedly. Good. Now remember to check your spelling of these carefully, okay? Because as you know, in the exam, spelling matters. When I was younger, I worked in and traveled around South and Central America for over 3 years. Of all the countries I visited, I loved Costa Rica the most. It had these beautiful tropical beaches and the rainforest, the volcano, and this really cool, relaxed pura vida lifestyle. It was amazing, but also very touristy. On the one hand, it was great for the community as it created lots of jobs and improved the economy as well as local infrastructure. But on the other hand, it also led to a lot of pollution and I felt a general exploitation of their culture for profits. So I've seen firsthand the pros and cons of a country being a popular travel destination. In the test, they could ask you about your personal travel experiences and your opinions about these places, as well as a discussion of the broader issues and concerns related to tourism. Here is one final exam-style question on the topic of travel and tourism. How do you think people can benefit from traveling to other countries? Pause the video and press play when you're ready to look at the final activity. To do well in Speaking Part 4, you have to be good at giving your opinions. So to wrap up this video, let's practice doing exactly that. Let's read the statements about tourism and think about how the economy, environment, and local people could be affected. Then say whether you agree or disagree with these statements. 1. Tourism encourages the protection of wildlife and natural resources. 2. Tourism improves infrastructure like roads, hotels, airports, hospitals, etc. 3. Tourism leads to job creation and reduces unemployment. 4. Tourism can bring higher levels of investment to developing areas. And 5. Tourists and local people can learn about each other's cultures. So, do you agree or disagree with these statements? Why not practice giving your opinions by writing your answers in the comments section below? We'll give feedback to the first or most interesting commenters. Well, that's going to do it. I hope you're feeling pretty good about Speaking Part 4. If you do feel like you got something out of this video, please go ahead and click the like button or share the post on your socials. And don't forget to leave your opinions on travel and tourism in the comments section below. We'd love to hear from you. So have a good rest of your day, and I hope I'll be seeing you later on in the series.